5 wars, not the largest in sheer numbers, not the longest in years, but the ones where a single decision, sometimes made in hours, reshaped centuries, and the unsettling part, in more than one of them, victory came dangerously close to failure. Close enough that, if one choice had shifted, the world you know might not exist. Before anything else, there was no Greece as a unified nation. What existed was a network of fiercely independent polis: Athens, Sparta, Corinth, Thebes, each operating with its own political system, military doctrine, and sense of superiority. Cooperation was rare, distrust was constant, and yet under pressure, these rivals would occasionally align, not out of unity, but out of necessity. That fragile alignment is where the first decisive conflict emerges, not as a story of heroism, but as a calculated response to annihilation. The Greco-Persian Wars begin with a mismatch so extreme it almost defies logic. The Achaemenid Persian Empire under Darius I controlled vast territories from Anatolia to Egypt and beyond. In contrast, the Greek city-states were fragmented and comparatively small. According to histories by Herodotus, the Persian campaign into Greece was meant to be a demonstration of overwhelming dominance following the Ionian Revolt. It was supposed to be decisive. It was supposed to be quick. But at Marathon, Athens made a decision that broke conventional expectations. Instead of waiting behind defensive positions, the Athenians advanced rapidly across open ground, minimizing exposure to Persian archers. This wasn't recklessness. It was calculated timing. The hoplite phalanx, heavily armored and tightly coordinated, was optimized for close combat, not prolonged exposure at range. By closing the distance quickly, they neutralized Persia's primary advantage. The result wasn't just a victory, it was a disruption of assumptions about power asymmetry. Yet that victory created a dangerous illusion that Persia could be stopped again the same way. Years later, Xerxes returned, and this time the scale was unmistakable. Ancient sources like Herodotus may exaggerate numbers, but modern historians, such as those cited in the landmark Herodotus, agree that the invasion force was immense relative to Greek capacity. The Greeks couldn't win a direct confrontation in open terrain, so they chose something else entirely. At Thermopylae, the strategy wasn't victory, it was delay. The narrow pass constrained Persian numbers, forcing them into a bottleneck where their advantage diminished. Leonidas I and his coalition understood the cost. This was not a battle to win. It was a calculation to buy time for southern Greece to prepare defenses and coordinate naval responses. And here lies a recurring strategic principle. A tactical loss can serve a larger operational goal. But Thermopylae also exposes a persistent vulnerability: intelligence failure. A local betrayal revealed a hidden path, allowing Persian forces to outflank the defenders. Geography alone doesn't win wars, control of information does. That lesson becomes critical almost immediately. The Battle of Salamis shifts the war from land to sea and from endurance to deception. Themistocles recognized that the Greek alliance could not sustain prolonged engagement against Persia's fleet in open waters. So instead of matching strength with strength, he manipulated perception. According to Herodotus, and supported by later analysis in works like Persian Fire, Themistocles sent a false message to Xerxes suggesting that the Greek fleet was divided and attempting to retreat. The bait worked. Xerxes ordered an immediate engagement in the narrow straits of Salamis. And that's where the trap closed. The confined waters neutralized Persian numerical superiority. Their ships, designed for scale and intimidation, became liabilities in tight formation. Greek triremes, more maneuverable and coordinated, exploited the chaos. Collisions increased. Commands broke down. What began as a Persian offensive collapsed into disorganization. Salamis wasn't just a naval victory. It was proof that information warfare, misdirection, timing, psychological manipulation could outperform raw force. And from this point forward, Greek strategy would never be purely physical again. But unity has an expiration date. Once the Persian threat receded, the alliance fractured. Athens emerged stronger, empowered by its naval dominance and the Delian League, effectively transforming it into an empire. Sparta, grounded in land power and conservative governance, began to see Athens not as an ally, but as a destabilizing force. And that tension escalates into something far more destructive. The Peloponnesian War, documented in detail by Thucydides in History of the Peloponnesian War, is less about battles and more about decision-making under prolonged strain. Unlike the Persian Wars, there is no clear external enemy. The threat is internal, systemic. Athens relies on its navy, avoiding direct land confrontation with Sparta. Sparta invades Attica repeatedly, attempting to provoke a decisive engagement, but Athens refuses. Instead, it retreats behind its walls, leveraging maritime supply lines. It's a strategy of attrition, not immediate victory. And then something unexpected disrupts everything: plague. Thucydides himself describes the epidemic that devastated Athens, killing a significant portion of the population, including its leader, Pericles. Strategy collapses when internal stability fails. Decisions become reactive, leadership fragments. And still, Athens pushes forward. The Sicilian expedition marks the turning point. Despite warnings, most notably from Nicias, Athens commits a massive force to conquer Syracuse. The reasoning is strategic expansion. Control of Sicily could secure grain routes and weaken Spartan allies. But the execution fails on multiple levels: poor coordination, underestimation of local resistance, and delayed decision-making. According to modern historians like Donald Kagan in the Peloponnesian War, the campaign becomes a case study in overextension. The Athenian fleet is trapped, reinforcements arrive too late, retreat becomes impossible. The result is catastrophic. What's important here isn't just that Athens lost, it's how it lost, not through a single decisive blow, but through accumulated strategic errors, and Sparta adapts. With Persian financial backing, documented in Thucydides and later analyses, Sparta builds a navy. The balance shifts. Athens, once dominant at sea, is cut off, starved, isolated. When it finally surrenders, the war ends not with a dramatic battle, but with exhaustion. And in that exhaustion, something new begins to rise. Macedon was never supposed to control Greece. It was considered peripheral, less sophisticated, less central to Hellenic identity. But under Philip II of Macedon, that perception became an advantage. Philip didn't just build a stronger army, he redesigned warfare itself. The Macedonian phalanx extended spear length, sarissa, increasing reach and defensive capability. Combined arms tactics, infantry coordinating with cavalry, introduced a level of synchronization not commonly seen in Greek warfare. But more importantly, Philip mastered timing and diplomacy. He intervened in Greek conflicts selectively, positioning Macedon as both ally and arbiter. And when confrontation became inevitable, it happened at Chaeronea. The allied Greek forces, primarily Athens and Thebes, formed a traditional line: strong, experienced, but predictable. Philip engaged directly, then executed a controlled retreat, drawing Athenian forces out of position. It looked like weakness. It was. As the line stretched and cohesion weakened, Macedonian forces exploited the gap. On the flank, a young Alexander the Great led the companion cavalry into the Theban sacred band. The break was decisive. According to sources like the Campaigns of Alexander, which reflects earlier traditions, this battle marks the end of independent Greek military dominance. But the deeper shift is strategic. Adaptability defeats tradition. And with Greece unified under Macedon, not by agreement, but by force, the scale of warfare changes permanently. The final decisive war isn't a single conflict, but a transformation that emerges from everything before it. Under Alexander, the lessons of Greek warfare, terrain control, deception, combined arms, speed, are no longer confined to city-state rivalries. They become tools of empire. Alexander doesn't just fight differently, he thinks differently. Battles like Gorgamla, documented by Arrian and supported by modern historians, demonstrate precision at scale. Facing Darius III, Alexander doesn't rely on numbers. He manipulates space, creating openings through deliberate movement, then striking exactly where the Persian line fractures. It's not brute force. It's systemic strategy. Logistics improve, communication accelerates, psychological pressure becomes a weapon, cities surrender before battles begin. And this is where the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Every decisive shift, from Marathon to Chaeronea, comes down to decisions under uncertainty, not perfect plans, not overwhelming strength, but timing, adaptation, and the ability to see what others miss. And maybe that's why these wars still matter. Because the same dynamics persist: rising powers, strategic overreach, information manipulation, fragile alliances. The tools change, the patterns don't. And if Greek warfare revealed how strategy could shape the world, the next chapter reveals something even colder: how a civilization could weaponize economics itself, breaking an enemy long before the first soldier ever moved.